the good doctor herself, Dr. Ellen Wald. Dr. Wald, how is your week going after a crazy NFL Sunday?
Oh my God, that was like crazy, but it was so good. Like after the previous week's games were just so like they were all blowouts. It was just not particularly entertaining. Like
Hmm.
wow, that was some good football.
Yes, it
I'm
was.
kind of bummed because I'm like a huge Josh Allen fan,
Mhm.
but um, it was a really good game.
Yeah, because that's because you are a Wyoming fan, right?
Exactly. I have been watching this guy since he was quarterback for Wyoming, and like the things he could do even then, it was clear he was going to be an absolute star. And so I'm glad that like finally everyone else is realizing this.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, just some of the things he did in that game, like places he put the ball, I just don't. I think there are only like a handful of quarterbacks in NFL history who could put the ball where he was putting it.
Yeah,
So.
he's got a cannon, and it's crazy. I don't know. I'm not a self-proclaimed NFL football expert. I love watching the game. I was a coach at one time in a prior life. That being said, I don't know how one does not cover Travis Kelsey with the game on the line. Literally, in that
Yeah.
situation, you don't have to rush anyone because if they run the football, the time will run out. You don't have to rush anyone. You could cover everyone. You could send out 11 defensive backs and just cover everyone, and they don't
Oh,
cover Travis Kelsey. I don't even.
Oh yeah, I mean the Bills' defense. I mean, I don't know what. Like, I cannot understand what was going on there. I mean, supposedly they had the best ranked defense in the NFL,
Supposedly.
and supposedly, but yeah, I don't know. That defense did not show up to that game. So yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, this is
Well,
not a Monday morning quarterback show.
well, let's get into something a lot less complicated than football, which is, of course, the oil and gas markets around the world, starting with Saudi Arabia and China. As the Saudis are expanding into China. They let's see here. Saudi Arabia retained its top ranking in Chinese oil supplies in 2021, with supplies up 3.1% over 2020, and increased its share to 17% of total Chinese imports. No real surprise here, right?
Well, I thought it was interesting because for some years prior, it did seem like the Saudis were actually losing ground to Russia in China, that Russia was really expanding its market in China. They opened a direct pipeline, to China. And so for some time, they were actually sending more oil to China than the Saudis were. But it does seem like the Saudis have kind of taken back their status there. One of the interesting things I thought about this was that it's really coming, the Saudis' expansion there is really coming from national refiners and some private mega refiners, petrochemical refineries. And it seems to me like that puts the Saudis at least in a better position than some of the oil suppliers that are really selling to a lot of the kind of teapot independent refineries, which have some of them have come under fire from Chinese officials recently for like evading taxes and somewhat. So to me, that says, I mean, Saudi Arabia is very, very much committed to the China market.
So one of the questions I had, we talked about this before, but about the Iranian numbers. According to this, Iran, whatever, they have a very very small percentage. Do we? Those can't be the right numbers, though, right? Because it's 260. I mean, it's 0% on the chart. It can't be that little, right?
Probably not. I mean, I'm sure they're probably sending more, but that's probably the official one as opposed to the like, whatever it is that they like. What is it? They like recycle through Malaysia? So yeah, I don't think it's. I'm sure there's more Iranian oil going to China than the official numbers are picking up. You're muted.
It was a really brilliant comment too.
Hmm.
So the other thing that stood out is just how little influence the U.S. has in Chinese oil imports. I mean, 2%. It's not a lot. For all the
Oh
talk
yeah,
about the show revolution, reshaping the map, when it comes
I
to
think two
China, we don't
percent
have
is
a.
actually impressive. Like that's actually pretty good.
But okay, look at who's in front of us: Kuwait, Brazil, Malaysia, Oman, UAE, Angola, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the rest of the world has 16% aggregate. We're at the bottom. We're at. I mean, listen. I'm not saying we should be higher or lower. It's just for a while there was kind of that whole sentiment. Well, the U.S. has what China needs. Oh, we need to work with them. We're not really
Is this just
seeing that
crude
much.
oil? Because I do think, or is it total petroleum products? Because we may be exporting more products to them than.
That's true. I think this is just. I think this is just crude oil, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, you
Because
could that could be right. Maybe the products were higher in.
Yeah, I mean it's. I mean, just remember, like the U.S. wasn't exporting anything, 700 years ago. So.
That's true. No, that's true. That's true. That's true. Okay, oil could jump to $150 a barrel this quarter on the back of an adverse supply shock from Russia-Ukraine tensions, according to our friends at J.P. Morgan. Dr. Wald, $150 oil. Are you buying it?
Am I buying oil or am I buying the prediction?
Both.
Well, first of all, I don't I don't do oil trading or anything because
No, I know.
I talk about it, and so that's kind of I don't do it. But am I buying the prediction? Well, okay. Let's see what this note actually says. Okay. So they claim so it's Brent prices. Not that there's that big of a difference between Brent and WTI at this point, but anyway, it could. Now this is interesting because they think we could see $150 oil in the first quarter of 2023.
Right
so that's interesting because some of the highest predictions, like I think Bank of America is still saying $100 oil, but this summer they're holding off until this summer. If an ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine leads to a supply shock. Okay, but what do they actually mean by that? Their economists claim the latest geopolitical tensions between Russia and Ukraine raise the risk of a material spike. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. On the back of already elevated inflation, global economy is being buffeted by another wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Adds to the near-term fragility of what is otherwise a fundamentally that doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. That's like I just read words and like did those words make those words did not make sense to me. That's not a thing. They need to explain better, or someone needs to pick better quotes here. Okay, so a quick 100% surge in Brent oil over 1 to 2 quarters to $150 a barrel. The bank estimated a jump would require a sharp cut of 2.3 million barrels a day in oil output, or 2% drop in global supply. Okay, so they're saying, but so they're saying it would get to 150 if we somehow cut 2.3 million barrels a day from the market. Okay, that I buy. Yeah, you cut that much oil, but sure, you get that kind of price shock. But the question is, why would that, like, why would we get that kind of a supply shock? The U.S. coordinated with others would likely impose sanctions on Russia. So are they saying these sanctions would actually take? See, in my mind, okay. So say they do try to impose actual oil sanctions on Russia. That's not going to stop Russia from, like, do you think China is going
China's not
to
going to follow
pay
that,
attention
right?
to these? China's not going to follow that. So Russia is just going to send more oil to China. Saudi Arabia is going to be like, oh, we're sending more to Europe because we can charge even more money for our oil in Europe than we can in Asia. And so, like, I don't see 2.3 million barrels a day coming off the market. I see Europe suffering really high prices, but I do think it would, like, even out.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I do find interesting is now, of course, this is the biggest, if this were to happen, I guess, geopolitical event of this magnitude since we've been doing the show. But for so long, we've talked about the threat of war and stuff doesn't really, we've had bombings and we've had rockets and missiles and retaliatory strikes and threat of drone strikes, and it really hasn't moved the market. I guess we're kind of back into that pre-stage to where the market is, at least feels a lot more tighter than it has been in the past 5 years. So now the news is starting to move the market. It seems, whereas before, I don't think we would have gotten this kind of, in 2018. I don't think they would have talked about oil shooting 150 um, on the threat of the Russians invade the Ukraine. So I feel like
No.
the market's kind of shifted back to that as well. But I'm with you. I don't know. You know, are the barrels really going to come off the market? I can't see how. China can't afford the barrels to come off the market. They have to have the barrels.
Can the U.S. even afford? I mean, like the how much? Okay, so there's another article I have farther down about U.S. Oil imports from uh from Russia, where it's from S&P Global. But here it's the next one, or no, it's two articles in. Russia Ukraine exports to U.S. Highlight risks to Ukraine talks for Biden, and if you look, it gives you a really good sense of how much U.S. imports from Russia have actually climbed recently. So, shipments of Russian crude to the U.S. in 2021 averaged 202,000 barrels per day, which is the highest in 11 years. Most of these consist of Russian export grades such as Urals, ESPO blend, and Varande. Overall, Russian crude and product shipments accounted for 11% of total U.S. imports between January and October 2021. That's not insignificant. Imports of Russian crude and products averaged 704,000 barrels per day in this period. So
So
we're
if you're
actually importing more Russian oil, or we did. The U.S. actually imported more Russian oil than Saudi oil.
And so we said 2 point something million barrels coming off. There's 700,000 theoretically coming off right there. They'll go somewhere else, but I'm just.
I don't think they're going to sanction Russian oil. I just don't. I mean, first of all, if that was a thing they were threatening, don't you think they would have been a little more explicit about that instead of these like the worst sanctions ever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what's your read here? Are the Russians going to invade? Is that just a matter of time, or is it just?
So I'm just going to say, first of all, I'm not an expert on this. So this is just my like general sense of the situation. I don't have like a lot of expertise in Russia, Ukraine, Putin. I'm not one of those like Putinologists who's like delved into his KGB career and makes, assertions about his mind based on this. But there are still things you can know, like in general about Russia. And I don't see Russia like launching any kind of like full scale ground invasion of Ukraine, particularly not when there are lots of other means of getting whatever it seems that they want out of the situation. Like, why would you actually like fight a land war in Eastern Europe in the winter when there are other ways of getting what you want, which seems to be a kind of retreat for NATO and a kind of puppet government in Ukraine. At least that's what I mean, I think that's what their goals seem to be. So I don't think it's likely that I think whether or not there'll be an incursion and how we define incursion is another story. And I would not be surprised if we see some kind of incursion. The question will be, will the US, Germany, other NATO people want to define that? How will they see that? And I have a feeling that there's going to be a big difference of opinion between like Germany and other smaller Eastern European countries. Like Germany may be like, nah, that's a big deal. And then you've got like Latvia and Estonia being like, yeah, it is a big deal because we could be next. So, but and then you have run the question of like, okay, well, who's in NATO and what's NATO's responsibility? And like Ukraine's obviously not in NATO, but NATO is actually like a defense treaty. And so if a NATO country is attacked, then all of NATO has to come to its defense. And so then the question becomes, what is an attack?
Right.
So I think there's going to be a lot of semantics, and Germany, Germany is not. I don't think Germany wants to. Germany is going to err on the side of like
Russia.
everything possible is not actually a Russian incursion,
Right. Yeah,
and
I
Germany
mean,
has a big say.
yeah, I think Russia is definitely going to be on Germany. I mean, Germany rather is going to be on Russia's side, so that's going to shift it. And then, of course, listen, Germany. You have Germany and Russia, and then you have Germany also with China, and so they need all of these different trade partners. And so yeah, they're a bit compromised, to put it mildly. And I'm not saying that they're right or wrong. It's just I don't think that they have. Um, Even if they did want to stand up, don't have a whole lot of footing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of a crazy situation also because like wasn't like Trump the one who was supposed to get us into like war with Russia while also being Putin's best friend?
Well, yes, and this goes back to this whole NATO thing and just what a waste it is. And the Germans want to do business with the Russians, and it's just a big cluster. So
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting Twitter thread that I was just reading. I don't know if I can find it again because I don't know where it went, but it was really interesting. Is someone was kind of saying, look, there's actually it used to be that that most of Russia's gas went through the Ukraine because the actual like transit through the Ukraine of gas was a big issue. But since then, the total percentage of Russian gas going to Europe has actually declined quite a bit. I'm looking for this thread that I cannot find, but it was really interesting kind of to see how that's actually changed and how there isn't nearly as much gas actually going through Ukraine, and obviously there's a lot more going through Germany. And I think what was the language that Germany used in its like most recent like threat or whatever it was? It was tweeted. Oh yeah, they said Germany held firm on its refusal to supply weapons to Ukraine, conceding that its stance is at odds with key allies, but insisting it will confront Russia robustly in the event of an incursion. And I just think the key terms there are incursion and robustly, and how you want to define those.
well, I guess we'll see here in the next few weeks. And okay, so if they, I guess, the final thing is if they do invade, to the point about Germany and the rest of Europe, um, if they cut off, if they for whatever reason decide that they're not going to buy from Russia because they invaded from the Ukraine, where are they going to get their, they can turn to the U.S. and
Well, we have an article about that from CNN. Uh-huh.
yes, let's go with that. U.S. putting together
Yeah.
global strategy to increase gas production if Russia invades Ukraine. The
I
Biden
feel like that's a
administration,
really generous headline for what's actually happening.
yeah, the Biden administration has been in regular discussions with a number of countries and companies in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia about stepping up production of liquefied natural gas to Europe in the event the Russians invade. Leads to gas when the Russians or if the Russians invade leads to a gas shortage. Yeah, whatever. Okay.
Okay, well, first of all, like that assumes that like you can actually they have enough like regasification terminals in Europe
Hmm.
to actually supply Europe with natural gas. I think the biggest one's like in Spain.
Hmm.
So, okay, that's already an issue, is regasification. Then all I can say is as a historian who has studied extensively prior efforts to like mobilize oil gas production for these kinds of potential events or like ongoing events, that like I do not think that the current government of the US has the logistical capability or like ability to organize this kind of a thing. Like um during World War II, the US basically mobilized its own oil production in order to fuel the Allied war effort. And then after World War II, there were basically like a committee of government bureaucrats and oil executives that drew up all of these plans for how they were going to mobilize US production and U.S. companies that were producing oil overseas to both keep Americans supplied with oil and gas and products, and the military around the world supplied in the event of like a Cold War situation with Russia. And they had all of these plans, and they were called the Petroleum Administration for Defense. That's actually where they're the ones that divided the U.S. up into regions. That's why we have these PADD regions. That actually stands for the Petroleum Administration for Defense. And like that's how they did it. And they had a lot of these plans, and like they worked for like a bunch of years, and eventually they disbanded, but like they had the plans in place. And then actually during the Suez Crisis in 1956, they knew there was a threat that Nasser might shut down the Suez Canal. And so the US worked with British and French and European companies to basically figure out how they were going to redirect the flow of oil so that Europe could be supplied with oil in the event that the Suez Canal was closed. So like these were things that we used to do. The idea that we're doing, and like this was like well before there was an actual like shutdown of the Suez Canal. People are talking about like it's an imminent threat, and we're just starting to talk to Qatar about LNG. Like we used to do this. We're not. This is like a joke compared to I think what we used to do. So sorry.
Do you think that the U.S. is in close contact with Russia and has a pretty good read of what's going on? Or we got spies, obviously. Like, how much do you buy into the notion that we really don't know what they're going on, or do you think that no, we have a pretty good idea of what they're actually thinking?
I think that we have a pretty good. I think we're in close contact. I don't think we have a good read on the situation. I just don't think that U.S. intelligence people, or I just don't think that either they, I don't think that they have a good read on the situation. I don't think they have the ability to like assess stuff in an accurate way. It's not like we don't have like George Kennan to like explain like here's what they're all about and here's what they're doing, and they're not going to confront you directly, but they like George Kennan's whole idea was that Russia historically always feels this has like always feels a security threat because it's so large and it's so big, and so it deals with that by expanding. And it doesn't mean that they want outright conflict, but they're always going to feel this like territorial insecurity.
And putting nuclear warheads on their border might actually make them feel a little insecure as well. I mean,
yeah,
whether they think we should or not, I mean that's just.
But beyond that, I just don't think that even like our security people and our defense people have the right motives in mind. Like I don't even if they didn't think that, like even if they were like, even if they thought like Russia was not going to invade, I think that they would blow up or they would like push up the threat because like where are we fighting now? These people, like, they're not going to get on the boards of Raytheon unless they're selling Raytheon products to, like.
There was a meme
there's a
the other day
to pump things up.
Yeah, it was the little guy that's got the stick. He's poking something. It was talking about the military-industrial complex. It says, "Do something or fight a war" or something like that. So yeah, no, it's yeah. That's
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist, but I just like I do think that these are highly corrupting influences. Not that that means that people weren't corrupt before. I'm certain that they were, but I just don't like you can't believe this. Like I for my investing.com column last week, I was kind of like trying to assess like, okay, what's the likelihood that, there's going to be an invasion. And so if you look at what is coming out from the US, it's so much more like incendiary than what we're seeing from other people. So like there's a congressman, he was a former FBI agent who was stationed in Ukraine. He said something like that there's a greater than 50% chance that Russia will invade Ukraine in the next month. That he says that's what U.S. intelligence reports say.
Just to be clear, last year I got crucified on Twitter multiple times because China was going to invade Taiwan this week.
Oh.
Every week for months and months and months on end. All of the experts knew that China was going to invade Taiwan this week. This week it's going to happen. It never happened. It never happened, which is exactly what I predicted. But just so I'm not saying Russia will or wouldn't, but to your point, these are warmongering. Even if they aren't consciously thinking that way, the way they see the world. If I saw, oh gosh, McMaster maybe on Rogan's podcast, I saw a clip of it, and he's like, the first thing we did when we got in there was we had to assess the threats, and so he starts to listen off like these 9 threats, and you're like, bro, North Korea is no threat to us. Like they are none. They can't feed their own people. But you just listen to the way he talks, and it's like if he really believes this, then yeah, he's going to see the world fundamentally different than someone like me would, because he is looking for threats. We're looking for threats, and it's like, well, okay, yeah, but maybe all those people actually don't pose a threat. Have you ever considered that?
Yeah, it's just like where did they come up with this number 50%? Greater than 50% chance. What does a percent chance even mean? Like there is no such thing. Like either they invade or they don't.
Right.
It's like one or the other. It can't be like anyway. And then and Jen Psaki said at a briefing on Tuesday, she's like, we believe we're now at the stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack on Ukraine. So just because someone's able to, like the U.S. could at any point launch an attack on any number of countries, does that mean that we're going to?
Right. Yeah. It's and that's you're very right. It's purposely language that puts you in the oh my gosh, this is getting close. And listen, I don't have a read. I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know what they're going to do. I tend to think it's going to die down, but I could be wrong.
Well, then there's it was kind of interesting because it seems like the NATO, the Secretary General of the NATO says there's a risk of military conflict, but it quote does not appear imminent. So he seems to think that there's less of a risk than the U.S. people. But I read some interesting analyses. So like this one guy argued in a foreign policy piece that like he based his analysis on past Russian military engagements and like non-engagements. So he looked at a bunch of different times where Russia like did engage militarily in a situation and times where like it looked like they might but they didn't. And he thinks that the conditions in Ukraine don't meet Russia's own standards for invasion. So he doesn't believe that the military and political conditions like that from Russia's analysis, the military and political conditions are not appropriate for military intervention in Ukraine.
Okay, I'm gonna solve all this right now for everyone. This will, you could pay me later. Green light Nord Stream 2. Just green light Nord Stream 2. Just green light it. U.S. Ted Cruz, shut up. U.S. shut up. Everyone sign off. Say you're not going to sanction them, and let's just move on with our lives.
Well, all that has to happen is for the EU to decide. Apparently the big holdup is that Gazprom had to start like a separate company as like the operating company, and so they did, but the EU doesn't think that it's like separate enough, and so they're not letting them. So all the EU has to do is like approve basically just approve Gazprom as the operator.
Just greenlight it.
And I think that Germany would do it.
Listen, the EU
there.
The EU has put themselves in a bind by buying from the Russians. However, if you're going to do that, go all in. Buy so much that they don't want to invade you. They don't want to screw it up. Like that's the strategy here. Just go all in on it. If you want to do business with the Russians, fine. I don't care. Just go all in. So,
but there's a powerful argument for that they're saying that like Russia needs these markets. Like these markets are really important to Russia. Like Russia's super invested in them, and it's true. Russia is super invested in them. Russia. I mean, I don't think that they really could just like I talk in my piece about like okay, so if there is this invasion and the U.S. does do some kind of sanctions or cuts them off from the SWIFT banking system, and they can't sell stuff to Europe or whatever for some period of time, like how much can they actually shift to China and Asia? And I just don't think that would be enough of a market for them. I really like that's my opinion. I just don't
Hmm.
think that like they need. I mean, they sell like Europe like a third of their gas. So
Yeah, right.
why don't they just ride that out and be like, look, we know you guys aren't going to invade because you want to sell them gas and oil. We know you want to sell it to them.
Hmm. Over 35%.
That's interesting. Yeah, of their GP's energy exports. It's not the largest though. I think they actually export more wheat and wood. Like Russia is a huge agricultural exporter too.
So one more Russia story, I guess. Well, we've got
Yeah, it's a Russia Ukraine
it's a
day.
Russia day. And
It's a
just
Russia
for just
day.
for the folks that out there, I see them on Twitter like, "Hey, you guys are pounding on Russia again." I am pro if they want to do the deal with Russians, do it. What I am not in favor of is all this back and forth posturing and wasting time. If the Europeans want to do the deal with the Russians, then let them do it. We should stay out the way. So okay. Let's see here. Where was the one I was
Well,
going to
this
pull
is
up?
like the biggest geopolitical story in the market
Oh
today.
yeah. Okay. So how a
So,
Russian-Ukraine conflict might hit global markets. So I was talking to a gentleman this morning, and he said he's down $900,000 in the stock market this year. I
okay.
was like, oh, that's brutal. Poor fellow. Sorry.
Oh,
I
you're
didn't know
having
what
a
to say
bad
to that.
day.
It's a bad day. So Ellen, for that gentleman, how will a Russian-Ukraine conflict help his portfolio?
Yeah. Okay. Not a financial advisor here, just to be clear. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, well, the Dow's down over 1,000 points since something, and the S&P 500 is down. And then you have like Jen Psaki being like, actually, it's up 15% since Biden took office, but we don't really look at the stock market as an economic indicator.
Mhm.
I love that because like come on, like you like that's all that like Nancy Pelosi and all like that's all they care about is their stock portfolios
Oh
because
yeah.
that's how they're making so much money. Like they care about the stock market.
Hmm.
Sorry. Okay. So
Well, the
so
Fed's gonna have to raise rates at some point. If they don't raise rates, I mean, so you would expect a big sell off as the Fed raise rates things, but we hadn't even got there yet.
yeah, I just don't think the Fed's going to raise rates enough to help inflation because if they raise rates too much, then the stock market will go down and we'll be in a recession and the bigwigs and the political
That's what I'm saying.
class and
Like
everyone will be
we're
pissed because all their wealth is in stocks.
right. We're already having a sell off before they raise rates, so that means they're less likely to raise rates because you're gonna have another sell off there.
Yeah.
And so, but to the point about I mean, if the Russians do a full on invasion, okay, of the Ukraine,
Yeah.
um, like it's serious. They're rolling tanks through downtown. They're like the rockets. People are dying.
Yeah.
It's a war.
Well,
Um,
here's what Reuters is saying are quote safe havens for you in the market. Okay. We've got well bonds, first of all. The 10-year treasury bonds and German 10-year bonds.
I'm out.
So they're
By
saying
the bonds.
bonds. My other favorite, Brent crude.
Bread. Yeah.
That's one. Brent crude. Brent crude will be up. Okay, fine, but I don't know if that's really qualifies as a safe haven.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in that.
I
Um,
can't hear you. Like, yeah, like platinum, silver, gold.
yeah.
Okay, metals, and the Swiss franc and the Japanese yen as currencies.
Mm,
Swiss
mm,
franc is like so strong. It's always so strong. They're always trying to devalue it.
mm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's what Reuters is saying are like, but one of the interesting things they do also talk about grains and wheat.
mhm, mhm.
They think that if there's an interruption in the flow of grain out of the Black Sea region, it could have a major impact on prices and add further fuel to food inflation at a time when it's already a concern. there are 4 major exporters: Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Romania, that ship grain from ports in the Black Sea. So they're saying the idea there is that a military invasion or incursion or whatever could disrupt shipments out of the Black Sea.
So, this
Russia's the world's top wheat exporter.
So, I guess my read would be my guess, purely a guess, no claim of expertise or knowledge of any of this. My guess is if the Russians are serious and they invade the Ukraine, no one's going to stop them.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
I mean, the Ukrainians might try.
Well, I mean, the Ukraine. I'm saying no outside help. Okay. So that means that I don't know how long the Ukrainians can self-defend themselves, but I suspect not for very long. Right. So what are we talking here? This with no outside help, this lasts a month, maybe 2. I mean, you see what I'm saying? It's
What
not
happened
like
in 2014?
What's
Remember,
that?
that's when they invaded the Crimea.
Right.
In 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So this was also right around the Olympics, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or no,
What I'm saying is this is not like if they're serious about invading, this won't go on the rest of the year.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a short term deal, I would suspect.
Yeah. So it's not like the US and Afghanistan.
Well, nothing's that really managed, but that's neither here nor there. Stu.
This is a great tweet, which is it's a joke tweet, obviously. It says Biden administration says working with Ukraine to make sure Russian forces show valid proof of vaccination before invading Ukraine.
They gotta have their vaccine passport.
Well, did you see the there was the State Department issued a like one of those like warnings, for like travelers or people living in Ukraine on Sunday, and it was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't supposed to be funny, but it was funny. God, where was it? It was so funny. It said, here we go. Do not travel to Ukraine due to the increased threats of Russian military action and COVID-19.
Oh,
it's like, and then the whole thing is all about the. I'm like, okay, so they were like concerned that the Russians aren't like wearing like N95s or something. It's like, and COVID-19.
Oh my gracious. Okay.
So yeah.
So
watch out for like a tank war, and also
COVID-19. Yes. Nuclear holocaust and COVID-19. Just to be clear. So I mean,
that's our State Department.
That's definitely our State Department, no doubt about it. Okay, so I think we've hit the major points. Yes. The Europeans are dependent on the Russians. That's not going to change anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
We both think that if the Russians invade, that no one's going to come to their defense. Maybe some small weapon sales, something like that, but no major military intervention from NATO or allies. I think that would be as far as it goes. Is that kind of your read as well? That Russia's not rolling through Europe, trying to rebuild the Berlin Wall. So okay, Germany wants to do business with Russia and China and everyone else. So so there's that. The U.S. is buying oil from Russia, so we're dependent on that. It's one of these things where it's. I mean. So what is your?
Here's the question.
We made fun of the
one of the things that they were throwing around was, are they get? Oh, sorry, I lost you for a sec.
Well, I'm here. Go ahead.
No, I missed what you said. You cut out for a second.
Oh no, I stopped. Go ahead. What you're saying.
Oh, I was gonna say. So, what do you think about this whole SWIFT banking system threat? Because one of the things they were talking about was potentially cutting off Russia from using the SWIFT system. And I thought that was, it was like, no, we wouldn't do that because it would like plunge the markets into chaos. I mean, one could argue markets are kind of in chaos now anyway. So like what's the read on that? Because that's a way of that could seriously disrupt energy without without actually sanctioning any energy.
Yeah. It's interesting, and also the Russians are either did or Stu's in the comments. You can tell me exactly. They're going to ban Bitcoin, which has alternative ways to move the money around. I wonder
Oh,
how
I
much.
didn't think of that. What a brilliant idea.
Yeah. What? So
They just accept Bitcoin for
right,
gas.
right. I don't know why these. It's so funny because the U.S. controls the banking system. So why would you not just use these alternative means and make them, deal with it like that? I really don't understand why they don't do that. It has to be a top-down control mechanism. They're afraid that they'll lose it. But they can convert to their own. They can convert it to their own currency. So I don't know. I don't fully understand.
Why don't they
Um,
establish a fiat Bitcoin, like a official Bitcoin currency, and then just use that? Say, okay, like Venezuela's like the petro or whatever. Why don't Russia could just do that and say, Germany, we're accepting payment in whatever the heck it is.
right. They could. Well, that's what China's doing with
Yeah.
the digital yuan. That's what they're trying to do there. And
Yeah.
so
Oh, see, I didn't think of that, but that would certainly be a way of like pushing. I think that would not be a good. That's not a development that the U.S. would want to see.
that might actually make the development the U.S. go to war. Like,
Yeah.
listen, you can kill all the Ukrainians you want, but you try to boycott the SWIFT system, we're going to
Yeah.
fight you over that one. So that might actually push us over the edge. So okay, let's put a one of these. They have prop bets for Super Bowl. This is our Russia Ukraine prop bet. Will this story be over by the end of Q1? We have, I say over, either the Russians have invaded or not invaded, and it's clear that whatever their actions are will
Crypto
be done by
ruble.
Q1.
I like that, the crypto ruble. Q1. When does Q1's like
End of March.
March? I could definitely see. I think that it will have calm. I think that the geopolitical risk will be lower from this, and I don't think we will go to $150 oil over this. I think that I wouldn't be surprised though if there's an attempt to kind of revive it if things are looking really bad poll wise for the Biden administration because like I was saying, like they need a win on something or they need something that makes them like look strong and like standing up to Putin. I mean, I think most people are like so don't want to see that, but I think that there's a impression that that is something that could make them potentially look good. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get some sort of like a weird revival of it later on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I tend to think that this will be resolved. I say resolved, even if that means Ukraine, the Russians are occupying Ukraine. That it will be resolved by the Q1. I don't see it being dragged out
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
Um, you know. So okay, all right, Dr. Wald, where will you be this week?
I may be on Bloomberg Law with some insights into a climate lawsuit that Baltimore has filed against a bunch of oil companies, and there's some oral arguments that are being heard this week. So I have a piece about that, and I will also be on investing.com and Twitter as always.
As always. Okay. I will be inside the war room. I said I was going to release Elizabeth Loftus last week, and I just didn't get to do it. I was out of town, so I will release that this week. And next week we have on Dr. Jamie Friedman, and Dr. Wald is co-hosting. So we have that
Fun
on next
stuff.
week. And Dr. Wald and I will be coming together on Twitter to hate on Eli Apple after he came out and said he's not sure which fan base he hates worse, ours, the Saints, or the Giants of Dr. Wald. Let me tell you something. I don't miss Eli Apple for 1 second. He was a bum when he's with the Saints. So we stand with all Giants fans
Really?
in our hatred for Eli Apple.
See, huh.
Oh,
See,
did
I
you like
just think like the fact that there's so many former Giant. Well, I don't like love him. I thought his mother was a really, really bad influence on him,
him?
and like just made so much controversy that didn't have to be there. But it's just like he's just another example of the players that the Giants drafted and then like cut or didn't resign who have gone on to have like way better careers.
When he was
It's
the
like,
Saints,
what's the problem that the Giants have? Like, why couldn't they have like
yeah.
kept and cultivated good talent?
I saw someone on Twitter. He was bad when he's with the Saints, and he wasn't that good. And someone said, "Oh, so the abominable toast man wants to start talking smack," and so.
Someone
Oh.
said on Twitter that the Giants are requesting to interview Josh Allen for the head coaching job.
Well, that'd be a.
I'm like torn. The Giants could have had Josh Allen. They could have drafted him, but instead they drafted Saquon Barkley. Like Josh Allen had more rushing yards than Saquon Barkley's had, and he's a quarterback, not a running back. Sorry for all the football talk. Ugh, it's just been.
It's depressing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, with that being said, we'll be back next week.
Next week. See ya.